How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Discovering Bigfoot Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle, and today we have one of our expeditioners, Jason. Thank you again for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure.
I appreciate you taking your time out of the day and even taking the time out of your life to come out and do some research with us.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely great. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I appreciate it. Both you and Todd have sort of encouraged me to come on here, and so I'm happy to be out. We're part of the same cooperation, so I'm happy to be here and connect and talk about wherever the conversation goes tonight.
Absolutely. Awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to. I've heard a lot about you. I've seen you in some of Todd's videos and stuff. Unfortunately, I never got to actually do any research with you, but that'll come next year.
Yeah, it'll happen. It will happen.
Oh yeah. I like getting out there with everybody involved. It makes it because it's a personal thing. So like I spent a lot of time with Darren, I spent a lot of time with Todd, Craig. So all these guys I like getting on a personal level with. So the podcast kind of gives me that kind of first, like, you and I literally just met. Yeah. So this is like our little introduction to kind of get to know each other. And then later on, when we actually get in the field, I don't have to be like, I don't know this guy,
Yeah,
or like, I don't really know what he's like. And I don't know if I can say this joke, so it helps, and it helps give you guys a voice too. Like you
sure.
get to come on and be like, yeah, like Todd did this, or I didn't really like how he said this, or, whatever. So, totally happy to give everybody, you know, their own opinions and everything like that.
Cool.
But yeah, so Jason, tell me about yourself. Kind of where do you come from? What do you do maybe for work, and what kind of got you involved with Todd?
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm Jason. I'm based in Guelph, Ontario, Canada. I'm a professional dog trainer. I run my own very successful dog training business. I've trained dogs and I've taught dog training seminars all over the world. And I'm currently extremely busy in my home province here and in my town, helping people out with their dogs. Apart from being a dog trainer, I'm a lifelong martial artist. I've trained in almost all the major martial methods there are out there. Um, my I've trained extensively in Southeast Asia in the martial arts. I've been to Thailand many times training Muay Thai or Thai boxing, including my last time there. I did an 8-month traditional professional Muay Thai camp, training camp there. Um, my real passion in martial arts is the Filipino martial arts, and that's called Eskrima. Sometimes it's called Kali. You might know it in the U.S. as Kali. Sometimes it's also called Arnis. And basically, it's commonly thought of stick fighting, but it goes way beyond that. There's a lot of bladed weapons. There's defending against weapons. There's like, throws, takedowns, submissions, striking, all this type of stuff. It's a very comprehensive martial art. I've trained in the Philippines since 2007. And my last trip down there, 2019, I got promoted to the rank of master after achieving my 6th degree black belt, or 6th Dan, if you prefer to call it that. Um, I've also got my 2nd degree black belt in another style of Eskrima from another part of the Philippines where I've spent a lot of time. So I'm heavily into the martial arts. Um, I'm also a professional musician. I've been playing with a band for 20 years. I've been playing with bands for longer than that, but the band I've been playing with currently for 20 years, Echo Deck, ECCODEK. Just released our 7th album about 5 months ago, available on all streaming platforms, and the website echodeck.com, of course. But we got nominated for 2 Juno Awards, and the Junos, for your audience that may not know, is basically the Canadian version of the Grammys. We got nominated for twice for World Music Album of the Year, which we didn't win either of them, but we had a great time. We showed up to the party and we kicked ass. So yeah, that's a little brief kind of curriculum vitae, if you will, about what I kind of bring to the table here.
That's awesome. That's definitely a awesome and interesting backstory you got going on there.
Yeah, it's just a taste, just to give you a little flavor, right? Because we've never met, so here's a few things just to kind of wet your beak a little bit about some of the things that I do.
Yeah, no, I when we first logged on, I saw the wall in the back. I was like, I know exactly what you're into. That stuff's so
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Darren has the same thing going on, and I have the
yeah,
utmost respect for you guys, and not because you can twist my arm behind my leg, but
mm,
like you guys, you spend the majority of your lives, training in a certain field and going every day or every other day and sticking with it and learning and getting better. And not only is it really good for your mental health, it's really good physically wise. And,
yeah,
you get to meet these amazing people who, just want to learn and they just want to, better themselves. And like, for me, it's really similar to this cooperation where everybody that I meet has been all different lives. They come from everywhere, and we all come together to this one thing that everybody agrees on, and it's like a family. And like we're all just here to better ourselves and further this. And that's I have nothing but respect for that.
yeah. That's nice of you to say. And of course, I know Darren. I've met Darren. I've been out in the field with Darren. Darren is also a serious martial artist, and we've connected on that. And of course, Todd also, right? Is he's a BJJ guy and a big fan of MMA, and so these are things that certainly that he and I have in common. And so we spent a lot of time talking about that stuff and fooling around with that type of stuff. So yeah, and of course, everybody has their own thing. Everybody brings something different to the table, right? We all have our own personal experiences and backgrounds. And, the common denominator is our interest in field research for Sasquatch. Right?
Right. Yeah. And I couldn't be happier with the people that get involved. And they've really been truly amazing people like yourself that just come out of nowhere and devote so much of their time and their energy and finances to come out and do this kind of stuff. And it's so humbling. And I feel like it fit right in. It's awesome. I honestly feel like everybody else is like way up here. Like I look up to you guys so much, and I hope I can have the awesome experiences one day that you've gotten to live through.
Well, I'm sure you will, man. I mean, it's all about just doing your thing, right? And
Yeah.
the stuff that I've just mentioned, these are my things, and the things that I love, and the things that I enjoy, the things that I'm passionate about. I tend to go deep into all the stuff that I do. I try to take it to the max and really go for it. That's just my style, right? And so, we all have our things. My things might be different, but your things, but it's all good. It doesn't matter. We will come together on those common points of interest for sure, and that's super cool. I really look forward to meeting you live and direct sometime, and getting some boots on the ground.
Oh yeah. No, that's gonna be a good time. We'll have to do a little practice jujitsu.
Yeah, yeah,
Just to entertain the Sasquatch watching us walk around.
yeah, yeah.
But that being said, so how did the Sasquatch come about to you? Did you have a certain experience that kind of triggered it for you, or did you see a movie, or tell me about that?
Well, I'm a product of the '70s, Kyle, right? So in the 1970s, when I was growing up, Sasquatch was like a huge thing, right? I mean, late '60s, mid '60s is really where it kind of came into to the sort of the public consciousness, right?
Mhm.
So in the '70s, it was all about Sasquatch. It was Sasquatch, it was King Kong, and it was UFOs, right? So I was really into Sasquatch and King Kong, and so as a kid, I was kind of super fascinated with that, and that's probably what everybody will tell you, right? It's something that sticks with you. It burrows its way in there when you're a kid. It kind of sticks with you, and then at a certain point, you do something about it. So, really, I've spent most of my adult life traveling internationally doing stuff, and so it really wasn't until COVID came around where I stopped sort of my international travel for dog training, martial arts, music, and all these other things, and decided I would kind of focus in on this other interest that I had, but had never really done anything about it. And so I started kind of trying to find out where to really start with that, and I was trying to find somebody who could potentially, you know, take me into an area where there was some type of Sasquatch activity and kind of get into it. So Anyway, I connected with Todd and went out with Todd a couple of years ago, and did a week out in Radium area with Todd, which was awesome, and you know, amazing education and all that type of stuff. Um, you know, I've been like a outdoorsman my whole life too, right? So I mean, I've done all kinds of stuff. You know, I do a ton of backcountry canoeing here in Ontario. I spent probably, you know, 4 or 5 weeks at least backcountry in the woods, portaging into backcountry lakes and stuff like that. So I'm really into that, but I've never had any experiences out there that would have sort of triggered me to pursue this activity. Just my own sort of interest from, you know, childhood memories. So anyway, I decided, okay, I'm going to go for it. So I went out with Todd, as I said. I had an amazing time. As you know, you've worked with Todd yourself, and so you know he's an excellent educator in terms of the ecology, the environment, the wildlife, the tracking, you know, Sasquatch information is super rich with him. So that was a real education. And then I basically kind of went from there. I connected with a group here in Ontario, who I'm sort of actively, you know, researching, investigating with. They're called Seeking Ontario's Bigfoot, and they're called the SOB crew for short.
Mhm.
And these are a fun bunch of guys, just a handful of guys, and you know we've done a whole bunch of research around here in Ontario. They kind of have they're one of these groups that have a hotline and people call up, and so they kind of follow up and investigate reports. So I've been lucky enough to kind of join them with some of that stuff. We've done some really cool expeditions. Um, and then I sort of, you know, I kept just you know, you get a taste for it, right? And as you the more time, you know, you spend out in the wilderness, boots on the ground, you know, kicking ass in the backcountry, like guys like you and I are doing, the evidence starts to mount up, right? You start to see the tree breaks, the structures, the shelters, the tracks, the trackways, um, you know, the glyphs, you know, the vocalizations, and you know, people like yourself with the sightings. I've not yet had a what I would call a full sighting. Um, I've certainly had them around me, but never really seen them. So you know, so these things kind of, you know, they whet your appetite, and they always makes you want more, right? I'm not satisfied with what I've even with what I've experienced up to this point. I want more. I need more, and I'm going to keep going for it and working for it. But um, last spring, I had the amazing opportunity to go out to Vancouver Island on the west coast of Canada. And I was out there for 10 days, or sorry, I should say 2 weeks, but I was out there. I spent about a week with you know, sort of a paramount Sasquatch investigator on Vancouver Island, Tom Seawood, who is a First Nations from the Kwakwaka'wakw nation. And I spent about a week with him out in the bush, which was an amazing education on the sort of in the indigenous perspectives on Sasquatch, and how they how for 14,000 years the Kwakwaka'wakw Nation has been interacting with the creature. So they have a whole system and guidelines and rules and traditions about what those interactions look like. And so I learned an amazing amount of stuff from him. I got a ton of respect for Tom Seawood. Sasquatch Island, for those of you who don't know him, check him out. A wealth of information, an absolute resource for all the Sasquatch activity on Vancouver Island, which they also call Ape Island, by the way. And so that was super cool. And then I went off on my own, did another week out in the bush, backcountry by myself. Had a lot of interesting, found a lot of interesting evidence out there, including some like very unusual structures that you might, you know, I will send you some photos or videos at some point about this, but they're like unlike any other structures I've ever seen in terms of like Sasquatch structures. Amazing, like shelters, bedding down areas with like lean-tos, and really amazing stuff. Tons of tracks. and had a really amazing experience up there. Again, just kind of got me um, more invested into research. And then this last summer, or I should say fall, I went out with Todd again. We spent about 8 days together, just he and I, and we had an amazing time out there. You will have, if you watch any of his Sasquatch Sunday videos, you will have seen some of that stuff. I appear in a number of those videos, and I'm probably going to be in a bunch more to come. So you'll get a sort of a feel for the things that we've done together. But we had an awesome, amazing, spectacular experience out there this year at Radium.
That's so cool. I'm happy that you're getting out there with him and you're actually getting success, because there's people that, have their own great success at home and they come out with Todd and nothing happens, or, like very little happens. And, that could just be the time of year, or maybe it's the weather changing that, they just don't want to come around, or they're not going to come around. So it does take a special person to bring them out and to get them to notice and even show themselves. But so I want to talk about um, Radium first, and then I want to get into Ontario, because I am really interested in Ontario and what's going on there, because I don't hear much. It's mainly Alberta and BC and Vancouver Island.
Mhm.
So I know that you went up to the top of Radium, and for anybody who doesn't know where that is, that's listening, that's where Survivor Man went when he spent 2 or 3 nights up there and filmed the top of the head of the Sasquatch in the tree. So it's an extremely brutal hike. I've only went halfway because of weather conditions. So please, Jason, fill us in on that hike, how bad it is to get up there, what it's like up there, and what happened up there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, well, Radium, like, as you know, you've been halfway, so you know the first half, right? Which isn't easy. I mean, I got up to the cave where you probably stopped, right?
Yeah, that's
And,
it's
and
that,
even
like,
to get,
yeah, right on the cliffside before that rock slide.
yeah, absolutely. So from that point, you got to cross the rock slide, and then that's where it gets hard, right? Like, I mean, that's where it gets harder, I should say. So it's a grind to get up there. I mean, I don't know how long on average it takes people to get up there. We got up there in 4 or 5 hours. We did really well, but we're also both pretty fit, right? So we were hauling ass up there, which was pretty cool. But it's the views are spectacular. You're out there. There's nothing out there. I mean, there's no people out there. There's no sign of domesticated urban life out there at all. You're a backcountry out there. And so we got up to the top of Radium. There's sort of two levels. There's sort of like the lower camp, and there's also an upper camp. The Survivor Man stuff was kind of filmed on the lower camp area, and we spent 2 nights up there, 3 days, and so the first night we were up there, as documented in some of Todd's most recent videos, he had a sighting. We had a beautiful full moon. The conditions were amazing. He had a sighting of what he measured at about a 9 foot Sasquatch came out. I was sound asleep because I was tired, man. It's a grind to get up there, so I was sleeping. He woke me up, and when he woke me up, well, we heard this Sasquatch, something big, heavy, moving, climbing around, scampering around the edge of the cliff. And we at that point we heard a whole bunch of that noise, and then we saw shadows, and then we just had a great time. The other thing was, of course, we saw this flashlight coming through, and there was a guy running out from like the lake that's down the end of the valley there. There was a
Yeah,
dude running out in the middle of the night,
yeah. So
running for his life.
for the people who don't really know, so there's a main trail that goes in, and it's literally in the middle of damn nowhere. There is a main trail, and we branch off of it to go up this mountain to get to Radium. So this main trail leads another like 4 or 5 hours up into a valley, and there's a lake up there. And so the trail is worn fairly well, and people do go in there and maintenance it. And there are an occasional hiker. There's probably 15 people a year that go in there. Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah, I wouldn't know how many people are going in there, but it's not probably not a lot.
Yeah.
I think there's an established sort of camping area at that lake that
Hmm.
people will definitely go out to. But from that trail, we off road, right? We crossed the river and then up the opposite side of the valley from that. But we saw a guy running out of there, running for his life, and it's probably like a 2 to 3 hour hike from where you park to where you get out to that lake.
Hmm.
And this guy made it from the lake out. We saw him get in his truck and take off from our bird's eye view up on the mountain. He did that in 45 minutes.
Whoa.
So he was running, right? And you could see his flashlight bouncing around and turning around, looking behind him. And we were laughing because we were thinking, oh man, that's the full moon. Sasquatch are out up where we are. They must be out probably all throughout this valley, including where this dude was camping. And then as he came sort of parallel to where we were camping, we were looking down off the mountain. Todd let out this huge, loud Sasquatch howl. And the guy stopped and you could see his flashlight and then he started booking it again. So Todd was
That's
kind of
messed up.
messing. Second night we loaded up the tree there, the same tree that is in the Survivor Man episode. We loaded that up with a dozen apples. And we went up about another 300 meters up the mountain to a much smaller ledge. We camped our second night out up there, and just sleeping under the stars, keeping the fire stoked at night to try and stay warm because this is like mid-October, so it's pretty cold. And on a clear night, a full moon clear night, it gets pretty chilly up there. So we were just sort of hunkered down, hearing all kinds of interesting stuff coming from the further up the mountain behind us in terms of like rock knocks and branches snapping and all kinds of stuff. We hung out. We came down the next day. The apples were gone. Some amazing tracks right around the tree, deep, beautiful tracks. You'll see in an upcoming video that Todd's going to be sharing. So we had a really amazing experience up there. He's gonna. I'm not trying to spoil too much. That's it. I'm giving you sort of a cursory, sort of a rundown of what happened up there for us because Todd will have some videos coming out on this, and I don't want to kind of spoil his storytelling. So, but it's an amazing place. Amazing things happen up there. He's had a ton of experiences up there over the years, Survivor Man as well, which are documented. And this experience that we had up there over that 2 night period is also now documented through Todd's kind of video work.
Yeah. So, real quick, I just want to touch on the shadows that you said
Mm-hmm.
you saw while you're up there.
Mm-hmm.
So, um,
Yeah.
being that it's a full moon, I know that there's probably other animals moving around. So, what do you think? I mean, I know you and I know what you saw, but just for
Yeah.
everybody listening, like, what
Sure.
makes you know that it was a Sasquatch and not some other animal?
Well, there's really no other animals up there, right? Like, I mean, we're above the alpine at this point, right? So you're basically above the tree line. It's just high altitude. We're probably like, well, we're like at 7,500 feet or something like that. There's no bears up there. There's no ungulates up there. There's mountain lions up there.
Hmm.
I saw tracks. I found mountain lion tracks up there. There's pikas,
Yeah. Yep.
little tiny little rodent animals up there.
Hmm.
Um, but there's nothing much else apart from that. And we didn't see any sign or evidence of any other thing up there. But shadows are shadows are shadows. I almost feel weird talking about shadows because it almost doesn't seem conclusive. But I will tell you this: um, we both were looking down this hill. The moon is behind us, down the slide, so that the shadow is being cast in front of us. And I thought it was Todd's shadow, or he thought it was my shadow. And I'm like, no, this is my shadow here, and you could see it. But we looked down, and you could see it was basically like the outline of my body here: head, shoulders, arms, torso. That's what we were looking at. I mean, what else looks like that? Apart from like a hominid, right? It clearly wasn't, another human out there on that cliff in the dark. All we would have heard is them dying, falling down and dying. Obviously wasn't that. It was another being. It was a upright head, shoulders, torso, shadow. Uh, that's what it was. So it couldn't have been anything else that I can, predict there.
Did it move at all?
Yeah, it moved, and that's what was part of the interesting thing, because I saw it move, but it still maintained its shape, and it moved again, and it moved again, and then it kind of disappeared. So it was there, and then it moved around a little bit, but and just enough to notice some subtle movement, and then it was gone. All the other shadows in the environment were tree shadows, right? Linear branches, and you know what those trees look like out there, the scrubby, coniferous trees on those mountainsides. And it certainly wasn't that, So it was clearly a being up there, big shadow. So yeah, that's what we saw.
That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
I would chalk that up to almost a sighting then.
Yeah, this is what Todd says too, but I'm like it's a shadow, right?
Yeah.
So I can't get past that paradigm. That's a
Mhm.
shadow, not the creature, right? And I
Yeah.
I get it, the shadow of the creature, but I still gotta see the creature, man.
Yeah, I understand that. Trust me, I can't wait to get out there and hopefully see another one or the same one. And
Hmm.
so that's actually one thing I wanted to touch base on. Um, the Sasquatch that Todd saw that night. Um,
Mm,
neither of us know that Sasquatch. We don't.
mm,
He's not. He's not one that we've had come around before. But
mm,
uh, the height is a very similar thing
mm,
from what I had my last night there. About
mm,
9 foot from what I could have estimated, and
mm,
also coming up to a campfire and just showing himself enough to see his face and then just leaving within a few
mm.
seconds. Um, I think it might be the same individual. So, and how far do you think that is in kilometer wise from the top of that mountain to Lower Radium?
I don't know, man. I mean, it's far, right?
Yeah,
It's far.
it's probably
Uh,
10 kilometers, maybe 20.
oh, more than that.
You think so?
Oh yeah, way more. Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I don't know. It could very well be the same individual. There's no way to know, right? And
Yeah.
and the other thing is, there's so many of them out there, right? Um, there's going to be a lot of 9-footers, right? For sure. And the ones that come around the base camp could be a completely different group than the group that's up at Radium. I mean, from where we were, uh, there was another group out by the lake, right? Because that's what was scaring the guy out. So hard to say, but it's possible. I would have no way to know.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, yeah,
I just wanted to touch base on that,
yeah.
just to put it out there,
Yeah,
not good.
well, you're looking at the same similar type of size, but you're also looking at similar behavior, right?
Right.
And coming close to the fire, not kind of possibly using the smoke as a little bit of a shield, right? Um, the one up on Radium, the campfire was between Todd and the Sasquatch, and the smoke was kind of coming up behind, so he was kind of using the smoke a little bit as cover. We feel so that could be similar to the sighting you had down at base camp.
Yeah. Yeah. It was it. The fire pit was between that Sasquatch and me, but it wasn't. I don't remember the smoke being there. I think it was blowing the opposite way. But
And it was a smaller fire from how I remember your story, your report about that too. It was just the fire was kind of dying down. There was still enough light, but it wasn't like a super stoked fire, right?
right, and it was one of those where with like a candle or even just with like a nice hot coal fire where it
Yeah.
pops and flickers and brightens and dims out. When I saw his eyes looking down, I could see the firelight reflecting and shimmering and doing that candlelight
Uh,
off of his eyes, and I was like, that's not the moon, that's not the
yeah.
star, that's right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Well, for sure, right? And I mean, I think these are things that happen is that we try to make sense of it in some potentially some other way, right?
Yeah.
And then ultimately, it is what it is,
Yeah.
right? It's,
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I'm honestly really jealous of you because I need to get up to Radium and spend a couple
Yeah.
nights up there. I
Well,
tried, I just didn't have the time,
you'll get
unfortunately.
up there, Kyle. You'll make it up. You've been up halfway. You'll make it up there, and you'll have a great time. I'm also planning on going back next season to get up there. I'm hoping to get up there 3, 4 nights if possible.
Yeah. No, I'd like to
Maybe more.
spend
Who
a couple
knows?
days.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah,
that would
it's
be
an
cool if
amazing
you could.
spot, amazing, spectacular spot, man. Just even being up there with the views, and it's a great place just to relax.
Yeah, that would be excuse my dog. Um that would be awesome if I could get up there with you and hopefully have some awesome encounters together.
Yeah, man.
But getting off of that subject, I want to talk about Ontario. And you said you're part of a group there.
Yeah,
What's going on in Ontario? I don't hear
yeah.
much of anything.
Well, it's not like I have my like I know everything that's going on in Ontario. It's definitely my home province, and I'm active in my own area. I mean, I do a lot of lone wolf stuff. In fact, most of what I do is like lone wolf style, right? So I'm out in the woods every day. I have some areas that I go to where I have found some amazing structures, tree breaks, that type of stuff, and I frequent these areas. Um, Now, but Ontario is I mean, you know, ecologically speaking, environmentally speaking, Ontario is a spectacular province, right? When you have so much forest, you have so many lakes, freshwater lakes and rivers, and it's just a labyrinth of lakes and forests, especially the further north you go. I'm in southern Ontario, right? Or the most populated part. So, but I do get up into northern Ontario every summer. Um, I hear a lot of reports, particularly through um, this group that I'm involved, this cooperation that I'm involved with here in Ontario. There's a lot of activity in Ontario, man. I just saw a video released recently about someone just filming one somewhere on one of these sort of lakes. But there's a ton of reports that I have heard about in northern Ontario. I mean, it's the perfect habitat.
Yeah.
Everything that they need to survive is out there.
Yeah, because you got, I mean, it's all Canada. It's
Oh,
you
yeah.
got moose, you got elk, you got all that stuff out there.
It's all there. And there's space, right? There's like uncharted territory. It just basically goes. It feels like it just goes forever, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of really interesting reports. Survivor Man is also an Ontario guy. He has a cottage up in a place called Tamagami, Northern Ontario, and
Hmm.
he's talked about a lot of activity he's had around his cottage, his area. You know, there's this guy from Sasquatch, Ontario, who posts a lot of stuff online about his interactions with Sasquatch in his area. It's only a couple hours from me, but there's so many more than that.
Hmm.
I was contacted by a woman recently who also Todd kind of connected us, who's been having lots of activity on her forested acreage, and I'm probably going to go out there in the spring and check that out with her and spend some nights out in the woods there. She's had some really interesting stuff happen. And reports like this come in all the time. There's uh, there's some super cool stuff that my cooperation has been involved in. In fact, they showed when I was out with them, they showed me some fascinating photos of some teeth that had been collected
Really?
from private property where there's been a ton of Sasquatch activity, and they have found a whole bunch of teeth. And my guys have actually been boots on the ground on this property, and the owners of this property have shown them the teeth, so they, I trust their testimony. And they've taken photos of it, and they showed me. And these teeth are like over 3 inches long. They look like human teeth, like molars, but they're huge, man. They're 3 inch molars, right?
Whoa.
And then there's like roots and stuff connected to the teeth as well. And they have like I think 4 of them, which is
Wow.
pretty
Now,
cool.
were they like recent teeth or are they like fossilized?
Oh, recent teeth.
Wow. Okay. So they're
Yeah.
not like, 5, 10,000 years old from
No,
the
no, no,
research.
no,
They're
no,
like,
no, no.
Wow.
Oh yeah, they're like, I don't know, I can't date them, but they're
Yeah.
not fossils. They're like, you know, like if you bust a tooth out and you put it on your dresser for a couple of years, it kind of just dries up a little bit,
Hmm.
but it looks like that, but
Wow.
but giant, right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
That's really cool. I hope they get that tested. And I
Yeah,
hope I hope they lock two or three of them up. so
yeah,
so that there nobody can, oh, we lost it, you know?
yeah. I mean, interestingly enough, like they don't have these, like the property owners hold on to these teeth, right? It's their sort of their treasures there. But my guys have seen it, held them, photographed them,
Wow.
and shared the photos with me. So I've never heard of teeth being found, because one of the big questions that a lot of people are always talking about is, well, how come there's no physical evidence, like in terms of bones? I mean, obviously there's DNA
Hmm.
evidence out there that guys have collected through hair and whatnot, right? But nobody's people say, well, where's the bones? Where's the bodies? This type of thing. Well, this is as close that I've seen of that, physiological evidence of another giant hominid being.
Hmm. Now, in your opinion, what where do you think the bodies are?
No idea, man. I mean, uh, I tend to favor um, the idea that they bury them, right?
Yeah.
They do bury the bodies. That would not be super unlikely for me. I mean, um, if they are an advanced hominid species, it would be sort of natural for them to do that. I mean, this is kind of what we do too, right? And it's about, and even when we have other animals that we live with, like animals that we love, like our pets and stuff, a lot of people will bury those too. It's just sort of an instinctive thing that we do. And so my feeling is they probably do that as well. And we know that they hide their tracks, and so they would also likely be hiding their bodies for ones that have perished. That to me makes the most sense. I've heard people talk about them being buried under, piles of rocks, and like finding burial sites and this type of stuff. I've heard also stories out in Vancouver Island, um, from my First Nations friends about out there about them being, and these aren't, I won't get into the details of it because those aren't my stories to tell, obviously, from a cultural perspective, but there's like systems of catacombs where they keep these bodies, and underground caves and this type of stuff. I've heard about some firsthand experiences of people finding those out in Vancouver Island, which is pretty cool.
That is really cool. I love
Yeah, what do
spelunking.
you know? What do you think?
I'm right there with you. I think
Mm,
if not being buried, um, and so my opinion with that whole thing is, I look at it kind of like the Native Americans, and how their culture works. Their burial sites are extremely protective and sacred locations. Um, and if either vice versa, Sasquatch learn some culture or some traits from the Native Americans, or the Native Americans learn from the Sasquatch, that came from somewhere. So
mm,
I think the reason we haven't found a body is because A, they bury it, and two, they put it in an extremely remote location, and they protect it, and it's fortified heavily. And if you somehow manage to meander in there, you're probably not going to come out. So
mm,
either, well, that option, or there is intricate cave systems that nobody knows about, where there is like a catacomb system, like what you're saying, where there's a certain chamber, or there's a certain um, many chambers that maybe they've excavated themselves over the years,
mm.
where they place these bodies, and that's the only thing I can think of it, because the troop in Radium, as far as we know, has 12 members. Um, so when you're looking at a fairly small population, you're only talking a death in the family or in the troop probably every 20 years, right around there. So
Mm,
you're probably not going to have an excess of bodies building up on you where
mm,
you're going to need to expand. Um, so I think it's more than likely that they're just buried in certain
mm,
locations, and maybe
mm,
it's they they keep all the families together or all the bones together where they just redig, a grave from 50 years ago, and place them
mm,
in there, in that same
mm.
way. So they kind of just stack them. Maybe, I don't know. I'm just that's because over tens of thousands of years, you're gonna run out of places to bury people unless you're putting them on top of each other. But there's
Yeah,
so much vast wilderness out there.
yeah,
Like even our cemeteries, they're packed, but they're not all over the place.
yeah,
So I don't, yeah, I can't really say anymore because I don't know.
yeah.
We could
No,
be entirely wrong.
yeah. I mean, nobody knows, right? And this is the thing. I think that sort of is a prevailing kind of common denominator in a lot of Sasquatch researchers. We just don't know,
Yeah.
right? I don't think anybody really knows, right?
Until
Uh,
one of us gets carried into one of
yeah.
their home bases and we see it
Mhm,
firsthand and we make it
mhm,
back out of there. It's the only way we're
yeah.
gonna be able. And we'll probably get criticized for that too. So
It's okay. I mean, we got to make speculations. You got to make theories. You got to follow through on those theories, and kind of run with it and see what happens, right?
yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the only thing we can do right now. I mean,
Mm,
we're limited to the little bit of knowledge that we have
mm,
of their how they look and some of how they act. We don't really quite know what they eat still. Like they
mm,
have to be omnivores because you can't sustain your body. I mean, if you're almost 1,000 pound primate or primate subspecies, you need like 6,000, 8,000 calories a day, like minimum. So it
mm,
has to be coming from somewhere, and it's not going to be
yeah,
coming from berries and leaves. It's going to have to
yeah.
be protein. It's going to have
Oh
to
yeah,
be fish. It's going to have to be elk. It's going to have to be anything you can find, and a lot of it every day.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And depending on where they are, following that sort of seasonal migration of protein, whether it's up in the mountains or down to the rivers or out to the ocean and digging in clam beds, and like wherever the seasonal protein concentration is likely where you're going to find them too, right?
Right. And I think that's why they don't like us right now is because we're encroaching so much on that.
Mm,
So when they
mm,
go clamming and that's their their source of protein for that said month or those couple weeks, and now there's people
mm,
there,
mm.
that messes with their food chain and that messes with their livelihood and how they survive. So that I
Uh,
completely understand why they don't want us around.
yeah,
Because we
well,
just
for
have this
sure.
habit of messing everything up.
Oh yeah, and I mean, there's so many stories out on Vancouver Island about people going out clam digging at night, and they're on the wrong beach, right? They're on a Sasquatch beach, and they come around and they get pelted with rocks and scared off, and then and then the Sasquatch come and that's like, hey, this is our beach, man. We gotta these are our clams, these are our cockles. You guys get out of here, find somewhere else.
Right.
You know.
And you said you've been to Vancouver Island, so
Mm.
have you had any experiences out there or any crazy stuff?
Um, I mean, I found some really amazing tracks out there. I found an amazing trackway one day. I spent about 5 days and nights out in this really remote cove that you had to. It was just a brutal hike. It's like the hike of hell to kind of get down into this cove, and it's a beautiful cove, sort of protected by cliffs at one end, and then it's right on sort of like the looks out right across to it's on the sort of northeastern side of Vancouver Island, so it looks over to the mainland.
Hmm.
And I spent about 5 nights out in this really remote cove. Beautiful old growth trees there because you can't get down there to log them. So
Right.
just amazing trees and stuff. I found amazing tracks down there. Had some. I left out the my friend who kind of led me down to this cove. It's kind of like his spot. He's got a gifting area there, and so every night I would leave stuff up there, and every night they took all kinds of stuff, and I'd put apples out. Um, I had two types of apples, and I don't know if this is if anybody can substantiate this, but because we often talk about leaving apples out and stuff like that, and for gifting areas. Um, if they prefer types of apples, I mean, when I was out with Todd and Radium this last October, we thought we'd try some green apples. We put out the Granny Smiths, and when I was there, nothing had been touched. They took all the red apples. They took a dozen apples from us out up on top of Radium Mountain. But when I was on Vancouver Island, I put out some Red Delicious. I put out some Galas, which is a sweeter apple. They took all the apples except for the Red Delicious, and I don't know why. I think the guy, my friend, gave me the Red Delicious, and I brought my own apples were the other ones, and so it could have been about the source of the apples. I don't know. The energy connected to those apples in terms of the gift. I just don't know. But do they like different types of apples? Do they prefer some over the other? I don't know. Maybe somebody out there knows. I don't know. But it seemed like they didn't like Red Delicious. That's the idea. But they cleaned out that gifting area. Every night I put stuff out, except that when I put the Red Delicious apples, they didn't take those. And then I sort of hiked and wandered down to some coves following the coastline, and that's where I found a whole series in very close proximity to each other, 5 amazing lean-to structures, mostly made from like driftwood, insulated with moss, leaning up against these cliffs, and clearly there'd been something bedded down in those lean-tos, really compacted earth. I have some amazing photos and video of
I'd
that
love to
stuff.
see them, and if you want to send them my way, I will throw them up on the podcast Instagram page.
Yeah,
But
cool.
before you send them to me, I have a few questions about them. So,
Yeah.
obviously, it's a very remote area, right?
Mhm.
What's the likelihood that a couple people went in there and made them?
Extremely unlikely. I couldn't say it's impossible because I was there,
Right.
but highly unlikely. Um, the interesting thing is that, the next sort of cove over, where my friend has his spot, he has a few sort of rustic cabins built there. He's a First Nations guy from the Kwakwakiwak First Nation, and so they have some sort of land use tenure that they can create there, which means they can build non-permanent structure in areas like that. So he put up a bunch of like maybe 3 or 4 cabins, but these cabins, they're more like sheds, right? So because my question was, well, they look like maybe humans built those, but if there was humans trying to build shelter like that, all you have to do is just like wander another 300-400 meters, and you could have just bedded down in a cabin, unlocked, walk in, shut the door. It's going to be way better. And if you were in that area, you would have probably seen those cabins before you had put all that effort in to build some type of survival structure. So really, I find it extremely unlikely. I'm not really a percentage guy,
Yeah. Okay.
Like, Todd's a percentage guy, right?
Yeah, he is.
But I'm not a percentage guy, so I don't know. But highly unlikely, extremely unlikely that it was the humans that made those things.
Okay. And were they just regular size, pieces of wood, or were they like heavy duty?
Heavy duty, some big pieces, because Vancouver Island collects a lot of driftwood, right? Big planks of driftwood, and it's just amazing the amount of wood that gets washed up on a daily basis. And these were probably about 50 to 75 meters from the shoreline. So some carried them up the hill and put them up against these cliffs. but yeah, I mean, human could have made it. A strong human could have put those together, but again, highly unlikely that it was.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
How big were they? Like, oh, and the laying length of it.
I would say, probably 6, 7 feet or more maybe. Um, and some of them even a little smaller. So I think the idea of these, they're sort of lean to. So there's like a cliff and they were just leaning against the cliff. So the idea was something could just be lying down underneath it and getting a windbreak because the wind is coming off the water too. And it's cold. It's a cold wind. I can attest to that because I was cold out there. But it was just more of a windbreak and an area to sort of bed down and get away from that wind.
Did
Yeah.
you did so there was moss underneath packed in there?
Oh yeah, they were insulated, and there was even on the ends of them there was even like side caps, where like at one end there was like it was sort of caps, so you can only really go in from one side.
Hmm. Did you happen to just peel away some of that moss and maybe look underneath for like bones or
I
anything
did.
else?
I did, yeah. But I didn't get too deep into that. And the reason why is because following the advice of Randy Brisson.
Hmm.
Do you know Randy Brisson?
I've heard of them. I haven't.
He's an amazing Sasquatch researcher in the Vancouver area.
Mhm.
His advice is that you don't go poking around in those things too deep because in his experience, he's gotten so many like unexplainable and very hard to cure rashes from digging around in structures. So I was a little bit paranoid about that. I didn't really
Understandable.
go poking around too much. I didn't want to get some weird parasite or something like that he's experienced.
Right. Yeah, that's I would have never thought of that.
Mhm.
I would I'm just curious to see if there's like animal bones or fish bones or something in there that
Yeah,
you would
no, I
just
didn't.
fill
I
in.
mean, I looked. I from just eyeballing. I didn't see any bones.
Hmm.
I didn't see anything like that. No bones, no fish bones, no nothing. No shells, no shells because they've been getting if they were getting stuff, they would have been getting a lot of shellfish, clams and stuff like that,
Mhm.
mussels and stuff like that at low tide. There was no evidence of that whatsoever.
Gotcha.
Um, but the ground was really compacted in all of these spots. That much I did see for sure.
What about leading up to the structures? Were there any impressions or anything like
No,
that?
I
Was
didn't
there
see any
a
tracks
worn
there.
trail or anything to them?
No, 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 I didn't see nothing really clear like that. I didn't see any tracks. I was doing a lot of tracking out there. I mean, I've got a decent amount of tracking skill, so I was in the next cove over where I spent half my time. I did find some amazing tracks up there and all kinds of other like tree breaks and other branches on the ground. Like I found some travel areas, like some pathways for sure that they'd been taking. All kinds of like broken branches up high and crushed branches on the trail that have been stepped on many times. And then some beautiful 15-inch tracks.
Nice.
Yeah.
Speaking about 15-inch tracks, I have one.
Nice.
That's this is an epoxy one made from the Patterson Gimlin footage. This is
Yeah.
a mold out of that. This
Wow.
is 15 and a half inches.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it really puts it in this perspective. Like,
Yeah. For
not
sure. Well,
even
just hold on there for a sec, Kyle.
you got one yourself. Yeah, you got the same one.
Yeah, I got the same one, bro. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's not many of them, so
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm extremely honored to have one, and I'm
Yeah. I
so
know.
happy that you have one too.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah. And that huge you probably have seen this track out there, that huge, like Todd and I measured it when we were out there. He did a video about it recently.
Mhm.
18 19-inch track,
That's
right? He's gonna
massive.
cast that. He's gonna cast that and make an epoxy out of that one.
God, 19 inches.
Yeah.
That's that's just like unfathomable. I mean, even 15 and a half inches is unfathomable, let alone
Absolutely. Yeah.
I man, I love these. these beings so much, but
Yeah.
man, just to have them around and not have them kill you is just so humbling.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big fan. I get really excited about tracks, right?
Yeah.
Like you've seen tons of tracks, probably.
Mhm.
I've certainly seen my share of tracks, but I never get tired of tracks.
Yeah.
I get so excited about tracks. I love them, love them, love them. Um, you see a lot of tree breaks and that kind of stuff. And after you've seen your 150th tree break, it's not as exciting. It's still cool, of course, but tracks never get old, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love finding them fresh, especially tree breaks, because that's when you can really see like
Sure.
what happened to that tree. You can see how it broke. You can see if there's any damage, and 9 times out of the 10, there's not a single pine. There's not a leaf missing. There's no needles gone. Like I have a picture on my phone, and I put it up on the podcast page. It's a little. It's like a 6 foot, maybe not even, probably a 5 foot um uh, what's it called? Rocky Mountain Douglas fir, and it snapped over, facing right at the trail. And if you zoom in on that picture, you can see where, on those trees that have the little kind of spikes that kind of just stick out, where they're just needles. It's just the bark that's kind of coming off. You can
Yeah.
blow on them and they fall off. This was a very recent tree break. There was still sap running down on it. There wasn't a
Wow.
single one of those needles gone.
Wow.
So there was nothing that grabbed it enough to break it, where you could see where the hand actually crushed the tree enough. Because it's still, a 1 inch thick tree. It's still somewhat hard to snap clean,
Yeah.
but there would be some indication of a hand grabbing it or something
Yeah.
grabbing it, let alone a deer,
Yeah.
making a scrape would have scuffed the hell out of it.
Yeah.
There was no needles missing, and I can't understand it.
Yeah, I know that's amazing, right? You'd expect some amount of peripheral damage from grip and twist and snap, right?
Yeah.
But nothing. Eh?
And I've seen breaks where there's literally like a little branch that comes off within a 1/4 inch of the actual break.
Yeah.
You can't explain that.
Yeah.
If something grabbed it, it would have snapped that.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
if it was a deer,
Yeah.
it would have snapped at that. This was above that tree,
Yeah.
because the knots go in. That's a weak spot. It broke
Yeah.
above the weak spot. Doesn't make
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. For sure. And sometimes you see that with the really tall tree breaks too,
Yeah.
with all these super fine, potentially like dead branches all the way up that have not been snapped or broken or damaged in any way, but that there's that beautiful snap right up at the top. Eh?
And I had a theory. I still have a theory where the ones that are like super high up there, there's usually a bigger tree near it or close enough to it where you could probably reach out if you had, 6, 7 feet of arm length where you can grab the thing and snap it and let it go.
Mm.
So I've been
Mm.
checking the trees, or the bigger trees in proximity.
Mm.
Even then, they're like untouched. Maybe a
Wow.
couple little rough spots on the actual bark, but never any broken branches.
Wow.
So, what do you
Yeah,
think?
that's cool.
What do you think the tree breaks mean, in your opinion?
Um, I mean, they're definitely telling a story. They're definitely communication. I tend to. I mean, I think Todd's probably got the best perspective on tree breaks that I've heard to date. And then they're basically sort of signaling like direction and boundary, like as boundary markers, right? Don't go here. Go here. Humans stay out of this area. Humans take this area. Trying to keep the peace by establishing some kind of boundary. Um, to me, that kind of makes the most sense, particularly because where we find these tree breaks, right? As you yourself know, frequently and typically pointed down at trails where our trails,
Hmm.
right? And then sometimes other direction, either sort of crosswise or parallel to the tree lines where perhaps they don't want us going, where we still go anyway,
Hmm.
for the most part,
Yeah.
enthusiastically. Um, but to me, that makes the most sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it too. Is it some sort
Mm,
of like, people here or
yeah,
trail here? or
Yep.
maybe even food here, and
Yep.
I think sim the simplest reason would be that,
Yeah.
and the more, extensive reason would be like, okay, it's this many years old, which means that there was people here or something happened here at this time,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
like don't go there because it's
Hmm.
this, like there's a thousand things it could be,
Yeah.
but for sure they point towards trails and they point towards human activity. So
Yeah. So I mean, I think you have to look at the amount of reoccurring themes there, right? And that I think tells the story, like really the clear boundary marking story. I think makes the most logical sense to me.
yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that one.
Mhm.
Another thing that freaks me out a little bit is seeing the trees ripped out of the ground and turned upside down in the holes.
Yeah, I've never found one of those before.
I I don't, it's crazy to me that I've had so many things and seen so many stuff, like crazy things that I don't remember if I have or not. I feel like I
Mhm.
have, but it might have been on a video or something.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I've seen photos and some guys have videos of that type of stuff. I've seen them in that context, but I've never seen one live and direct.
right, yeah. I
Mhm.
think there's actually a couple going out to Nordegg. That's where I saw it. Because I talked to Todd about it.
Mhm.
So I didn't actually see him with my own eyes, but they're along the road. I think going into Nordegg, and
Uh,
like loggers haven't been in there in like 60 years.
uh,
So like, and why would they do that? It doesn't make
yeah,
any sense, and the tree's newer than that.
yeah,
So
yeah. Who knows? I mean, that's an interesting one. I wonder what that means.
right, yeah, that's probably an intimidation display for either humans or other Sasquatch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because
Probably you're right.
the
Yeah, because that takes an absurd amount of strength to flip a tree over, uproot it, flip it over, and jam it in.
yeah,
That's sick.
it's really kind of
Yeah,
disgusting.
yeah,
But that's the only thing I could think of was just be like, hey, I'm this is like how strong I am. Don't come into my territory,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
Cool.
we're unfortunately out of time. So, like I said, before, I appreciate you coming on the show and taking the time to come on and
Yeah,
talk about
you're
it,
very welcome.
and coming out and actually, putting your name out there and being a part of this. I know it's tough for a lot of people to be serious about the subject, let alone put their name out there on the table on the cutting board. So I appreciate what you're doing and being a part of the cooperation.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I mean, no guts, no glory, right?
Right.
So, you can't keep a good man down. So it's all good, man. Um, I feel like we're just kind of getting warmed up with our conversation here. So maybe we'll talk again sometime,
Oh
but
yeah.
certainly you and I can maybe stay connected and go for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You got
So,
my number, so please give me a call anytime.
sure.
I'd love to keep in contact with you. And too, we got next year, and I expect to be doing the podcast still next year.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
if we have some crazy stuff happen, we'll get on and we'll talk about it. And
Yeah.
document it.
Cool. Well, good to connect. Excellent work on the podcast, by the way, Kyle. You're doing a great job. I really appreciate the work you're doing in that department. You got a very good spirit about you, and you got a good way about you with the guests that you have on. I think they all appreciate that. I certainly do. So thank you for that, and we'll be in touch.
Awesome. Like I said, thank you for that. That's the kind of stuff I like to hear, and it keeps me going with these podcasts. I like I said, I do it for you guys. So seeing that you really appreciate that just like keeps me going.
Cool.
But for anybody else listening who wants to get a hold of me or Todd, reach out discovering Bigfoot podcast at gmail.com. That's my personal email. You can go visit the Discovering Bigfoot podcast Instagram page. You can also reach out on Facebook. We're on the Discovering Bigfoot fan group. YouTube, Savannah Bigfoot. You can get a hold of us. It's not impossible. Darren got a hold of us. Jason got a hold of us. You can do it if you need to. Please reach out. Thank you again, Jason, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
Take care, man.